Welcome to the rebroadcast of the Liturgy of the Word from our celebration of Holy Mass at the Catholic Church of St. Monica on the 30th Sunday in Ordinary Time, October 23rd, 2016. The celebrant and homilist for this Mass is our pastor, Fr.Jack Durkin.
A reading from the book of Sirach.
The tax collector stood off at a distance and would not even raise his eyes to heaven, but beat his breast and prayed, "O God, be merciful to me, a sinner." This is what we do at the beginning of every Mass. This is why we, in part, hit our heart as we say, I have sinned through my fault, my most grievous fault. And I stand before you as a man who has sinned through my fault, my most grievous fault. I am a man of sin. And in the midst of sin, God called me. And I knelt in my apartment as a man of sin. And God said, I appoint you to go preach. And I was like, but I'm a sinner. But he says, but I found you kneeling in your apartment praying to me. And nobody else is doing that. And you are a sinner. But you are to speak. And you are a sinner. But I need you as a watchman. And you are a sinner. And you're not to be quiet. The Lord hears the cry of the poor. Do you? We should identify the poorest in our country. We should identify those who are the poorest. And the poorest in our country are the unborn because they have no rights and they are murdered on a daily basis. And we've murdered 60 million of the unborn. And the poorest of those poor are those who live in poor populations in our country. The Pope has told us what poverty is. First of all, poverty is people who don't know Jesus Christ. That's the worst poverty. The second poverty is people who don't know right from wrong. And the third worst poverty is that they don't have the basic necessities of life. 3 poverties. If you do any investigation of the current election, and you look at a particular candidate in a particular party, you will see a particular candidate and a particular party furthering this threefold poverty, making it worse, and saying they're making it better, but they're not. First of all, not knowing Jesus, to destroy religious liberty, to destroy our church. The government powers and laws now saying if we celebrate Vinnie D's, that if a man who says he's a woman should go in the girls' room at your church, how can we proclaim Christ if we affirm somebody in their confusion and allow a man to go into the girls' room? Secondly, don't know right from wrong. We have people who are calling good evil and evil good. We have a government that's calling good evil and evil good. And then we'd say, not having the basic necessities of life. Let me tell you something. We have a government that's proposing and carrying out legally the murder of people. It's not that they don't have the necessities of life. It's that they're dead. They have no life. And instead of helping women and men who have troubled pregnancies to take on the responsibility of being mothers and fathers, and instead of helping that woman bring that child to bear, all that people talk about is giving her the option of killing the child. We have an individual and a party promoting the culture of death. Promoting the culture of death. The linchpin of it is what are called, quote, reproductive rights. We as a church don't believe in reproduction. That's for cars. We believe in procreation. That's for human persons in cooperation with God. And nobody has a right to be sexually promiscuous. And nobody has a right to murder a child. And nobody has a right to say, I feel like I'm a woman if I'm a man. If they say these things and do these things, we should help them to see what is truly right. What has destroyed our country is that the government has taken over areas that should hardly be tolerated. Promoting, teaching, instructing, and supplying contraception. Promoting, teaching, and instructing about sterilization. Promoting, teaching, and instructing about abortion. And we not only do it in our country, but we export it to poor countries. We say, if you want us to help you, you'll have to support contraception, sterilization, and abortion. Before we give you food, before we give you shelter, we need to set up an office that promotes reproductive rights. I again was kneeling outside of Planned Parenthood by myself this Friday. And again, there's a lot of business on Friday at Planned Parenthood in the afternoon. There are people of all different races who go into Planned Parenthood. There are people who drive very shoddy, worn-out Fords that go there. And there are people who also drive one of the prettiest Porsches I've ever seen in my life that go there. The rich and the poor go there. And let me tell you, if there's nothing about Planned Parenthood that's going on there, if you look at the list, which I did read of what is done, there is no marriage preparation. And everything is not about having children, but not having children. There is no planning of parenthood going on at Planned Parenthood. We as a church should not be forced to support Planned Parenthood. We are the ones who teach Planned Parenthood. We are the ones who know what it means to plan to be a parent. We are the ones that should be invited to a place called Planned Parenthood to teach NFP and to teach marriage prep. I didn't get an invitation when I was kneeling out there the other day. I had no invitation, none whatsoever. But I did kneel and I did pray. And as I knelt there, some people honked their horns in support of my position. But one young woman in a car, the only thing I heard her say was, abortion is good. We have reached the point, because there used to be a time where even those who were for choice never said abortion is good. How we vote indicates whether we think abortion is good or not. My brothers and sisters, our government is not here to promote promiscuity and immorality. That's not its job. Our government is not here to destroy poor persons and poor families by promoting promiscuity and abortion. What we see is by government policies, poverty's gotten worse. The poverty of knowing Jesus. What do we know statistically? When I was a kid, we used to say the word nun, and it meant a woman wearing a habit who knelt down before God. In our culture now, the word nun means I have no religious affiliation. 25% of our population That's what it means to be a none, N-O-N-E now. The poverty of not knowing right from wrong. I have a girl, a young woman, telling me abortion is good. Where did that instruction come from? Where do you hear that all the time? Who would she be listening to draw a deduction as a young woman who, by all nature, I guarantee you, that woman doesn't really believe that. But she's heard it over and over and over again from women and men who are in power and have money and preach this all over the place and say it's the best thing we can do for the poor is to encourage immorality through contraception, and then when they have an accidental pregnancy. And there's nothing more obvious that the action that is being done leads to pregnancy, that we have to eliminate and terminate that pregnancy. What has this led to? Greater abuse of women, trafficking in sex slaves, pornography, greater prostitution. Now you can just go online. Dating websites? Yeah, sure, dating websites. Cohabitation, virtual orphans and gang violence, divorce. The big program of promoting contraception and abortion has only made people poorer. And those who claim to help the poor, that's their primary program. And then, on top of that, as the family's being utterly destroyed by these policies, then to redefine marriage on top of that. What is redefinition of marriage? Marriage is whatever you say it is. Marriage is whatever you define love as. And it doesn't address the essential issue, which is when is it right to have sex and when is it wrong? The church is not against love. The church is against perversion, twistedness, abuse of women, a lack of discipline on the part of men. The church is against immorality. It's the best defender of women. Marriage, my brothers and sisters, what's happening with marriage right now? Marriage, and I put it in quotes, legally is increasing among people of the same sex and decreasing among people of complementary sexes. Let me just say that again. We have an increase in marriage among people who are the same sex. We have a decrease in marriage among people who are of the complementary sex. Where's that coming from? Why is that happening? What does it mean? Is that good for our culture? Is that bad for our culture? What are the ideas that are driving that? And what we realize too is not just the family, but the very person. The very person is under attack. Whatever a person feels, he or she is. And we know that's not true. We are permitting people to harm themselves and not help them. Think about this very simply. Because I have to work with teens who I love dearly. When a young woman is suffering from anorexia and tells me she's overweight and she only weighs 60 and should weigh 100, what do I say to her? I say, honey, you're not overweight. We need to help you see yourself differently. When a teen comes to me and says, I'm cutting myself, I don't say to that teen, you know what? Keep going. No, I say, don't do that. Don't harm yourself. I don't know why this is happening, but make a better decision. Don't harm yourself. Why is it if you had two parents and a boy said, I think I'm really a woman, they would take him to the doctor so he could change his entire body? Why isn't that considered child abuse? It is child abuse. A girl with anorexia who's confused about her weight, a teen who's confused and cutting themselves, and a boy who is confused and ready to cut himself to look like someone he'll never be. To encourage that is not medicine, but abuse. I don't want to support abuse. So many people were concerned because they said the church was too silent about the molestation of children. Why is there not the same concern for the murder of children and the abuse of children? Why is that not the case? We do not believe in do-harm medicine. We do not support unhealthy sexual relations, but do-harm medicine does. We do not support abortion, but do-harm medicine does. We do not support sex changes, but do-harm medicine does. We do not support euthanasia, but do-harm medicine does. We're going to reach the point to where we're going to be forced to pay for somebody to have a sex change and then pay for the pill that's going to euthanize them when that doesn't solve the problem. Even the little sisters of the poor are being called to support this. Seriously. Seriously. The little sisters of the poor have to support do-harm medicine when they're taking care of those no one else would take care of. Our view as Catholics is this: it is not the church getting into politics, but political tyrants threatening the church, political tyrants killing the most innocent, political tyrants manipulating the poor while claiming to help them. That's what I oppose. And as a church, I will oppose that. And what I'm saying is, politics, get out of my church and get down to real politics. Because what politics should be is about things we can debate about. We should not have to debate about abortion. That should be like talking about whether we would enslave black people. I don't want to debate about that. As far as I'm concerned, that's off the table. I don't want to debate about whether if somebody's Jewish, they should be actually put in a death camp. I don't want that to be debated. And I look forward to the day that we don't debate about abortion, because it's like talking about enslaving a black person or putting a Jewish person in a death camp, because it's exactly the same thing. It shouldn't even be a political topic. It shouldn't even be discussed. It's an embarrassment to discuss it. But nobody else is. That's why we're forced to say something about it in the church. And my brothers and sisters, it's our fault. I say, as an individual Catholic, I'm a sinner. But as a church, believe me, if the church voted consistently according to the conscience well-formed, not deformed, there wouldn't even be this situation. It's our fault, because politics has divided our church. As a Catholic now, if you want to be popular, stand for do-harm medicine and authentic abuse for the poor, and you'll be applauded. If you want to not have any power in the world and to risk actually your job and your livelihood, speak with faith. Speak with faith, because you'll be on the side of the little ones who are kicked to the curb every single day. And my brothers and sisters, I want to be on that side. I don't want to go and say, you know what? I cared so little about the abortion of children that there was some other bigger priority when I voted. Because I don't think Jesus will have us stand before him. I think he'll have us stand before the 60 million aborted little ones whose cry he heard because it was the cry of the poor. That's what I think will happen. I don't want to be at that place. And I pray to God Almighty that you do not either. Our view of what the government is called to do is to defend the rights of all human persons and promote the common good of all persons. If you read in the compendium of the Catechism of the Catholic Church, number 402, the human person is and ought to be the principle, the subject, and the end of all social institutions. And that includes our government. Certain societies, such as the family and the civic community, are necessary for the human person. We need a government that doesn't destroy the family and redefine marriage, but a government that protects the family and upholds marriage. That's what we need. So what is our faithful Catholic goal? First, to reestablish authentic political debate. There shouldn't be any debate about abortion, just as we should not debate about enslaving individuals because they are black or putting individuals in death camps because they are Jewish. That should be an end to that debate. We need to work to move as strong as we possibly can to end that even being on the ledger of debate in the United States of America, as it is a mortal sin upon our country, just as slavery of the blacks was a mortal sin upon our country. We need to speak truth again. Nobody has a right to murder anyone. The one who is murdered is the one who has the rights. Nobody has that right. When people say somebody has a right to murder somebody, that's just a lie. It's erroneous thinking, and it should be just viscerally opposed. Discrimination. Look, there's a difference between unjust discrimination and just discrimination. How do we discriminate? We don't have 13-year-olds vote. Your 13-year-old can stand up and say, I'm being discriminated against. I say, yes, you are. You are being fairly discriminated against. Go back in your chair and be quiet. Discrimination. What's unjust discrimination? It is unfair to say, when I grew up in Asheville, North Carolina, it was unfair discrimination to say, whites go to this restroom and blacks go to that restroom. That is unjust discrimination. But it is fair and just discrimination to say, men go to the men's room and women go to the women's room. That is just a commonsensical thing that everyone can agree to. There is a difference between discrimination that is erroneous and discrimination that is a sign of intelligence and the use of right reason. And we need to have authentic political debate about important things like immigration, economy, proper defense. Catholics can have a heated debate and disagree about these topics. But about the topic of abortion, marriage, there's no disagreement. There is right and there is wrong. And my brothers and sisters, we should end up on the right side. Silencing faithful Catholics will not only silence right religion and revelation, but right reason and natural law. Our brothers and sisters, we're about ready to enter into a time of utter moral relativism, where just because somebody feels some way defines reality, and that's never been the case. You've never raised your children saying how you feel is what is right. None of us have ever raised that. I've never been able to act. I do not feel like preaching this homily today, but I need to preach it, and it's the right thing to do. I don't behave on what I feel like doing. I behave on what right reason tells me to do and my God tells me to do. And I pray that each one of you does the same. Now, do I do that perfectly? No. In this homily today, you have heard an imperfect man deliver an imperfect message. But I'm going to tell you something right now. God commanded me to deliver it. And he said, even if it's done imperfectly, do it anyway. Isn't that the way God is? Everyone in this room, you all are Christians. You all are sinners. You all are imperfect, just like me. But God says, do the right thing imperfectly, because there's people who are doing the wrong thing with absolute perfection. Am I right? All the people on the right side, they're not even in the game. All the people on the wrong side, they're completely motivated, completely in position, completely supporting with power, completely unified. That's got to change. Or nothing will change in this country. It'll only get worse. My brothers and sisters, politics has helped to divide us as Catholics. But may the cry of the poor unite us again in our one God in three persons, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Trusting in the mercy of God, our Father, who looks upon us as his own